Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. Next guest is a friend of mine. We have been running parallel tracks for 40 years. He was early on in the action pistol game, actually wrote for Rolling Stone magazine, if I remember right. One of the early guys on social media about guns, one of the early guys doing TV about guns, one of the early guys, well, basically a trailblazer, and actually a ballistic bon vivant, joined by my friend Michael Bane. Hey, Michael.
Tom, it is always good to be with you. We don't get together enough.
We don't, but, whenever we do, we sure have a good time.
I just wanted to mention something that you were talking about in the earlier segment. Of Henry Longfellow's, Paul Revere's Ride, which happened 246 years ago tonight. Right. And the very closing of that, which I was forced to memorize in high school, which they don't do anymore, was through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Well, brother, it's midnight.
Yeah.
And
that's why I wanted to get you on here. This piece you just wrote, The Very Real Danger of Politically Sanctioned Violence. And it's more than just self-defense and taking care of your family. This was like an all-encompassing piece of where we are today. And sometimes you kind of have to take people and shake them by the shoulders and say, hey, look, pay attention. This is what's going on, man.
Well, when I started putting this stuff together, I talked to really some of our friends, people that you and I consider close friends who are really literally the top firearms trainers in the world for law enforcement, civilian, whatever. And when I kind of outlined this to them, almost all of them looked at me and went, oh, my God, Michael, oh, my God. We think you're right. We think that the whole landscape for self-defense in the United States has in the last 2 years shifted. And that's because of the concept, I think, of politically sanctioned violence.
What do you mean by that?
I have, of course, it is violence that is either implicitly or directly encouraged, allowed, and protected by a political group. In the case that we see, the current iteration of the Democratic Party has essentially street soldiers, be they BLM, Antifa, call them what you will. But the fact is that the rules for them are different than the rules for us. And when we run up against each other, the things that we've been, I've taught, you've taught, the things that we have been taught over the years is, okay, aggressor, good guy, right? And we have basically been taught, we don't use this phraseology in civilian self-defense, but it's correct. We're taught rules of engagement. Under these circumstances, you may protect yourself with up to lethal force. That doesn't count if the aggressor is politically sanctioned, meaning he is now protected. He or she not going to necessarily get arrested. If they do, they're out very quickly. A political group is providing funds, is providing support. I mean, all those BLM huge buses, all those big stacks of bricks that showed up someplace in the riot, medical support, endless cash. This is a separate group than what we've seen in the United States. And if we come up against them, every time that's happened so far, the deal is we lose. We lose.
Even to make the fine point on this, even if you say, but I did everything I've always been taught. I tried to retreat. I tried to do this. Then I finally, when faced with what appeared to me to be a violent action which threatened grave bodily harm or death, I used my firearm or I did this other thing. I did it all right. They say, yeah, but you don't understand. None of that matters because you did it against people who are politically protected.
And that is exactly correct. And that is exactly what we're seeing. I mean, I don't want to, everything doesn't hinge on like the Rittenhouse case, but it's a clear example of having analyzed that video, sitting down with top instructors. That kid was within what we teach.
Right.
He did those things that we taught him. His life is ruined. He's done. He may get away from the murder charges, but he's bankrupt.
Right. One of the things you talk about in here, and this is the long article. By the way, where can people read this article?
They can find it on michaelbane.tv.
Okay,
And it's in the
michaelbane.tv,
blog
B-A-N-E.
section.
Okay. One of the things you talk about in here is the need to reassess, to refigure, to restructure your thought process. And the things that, frankly, would grate against most of us are things that we have to do or may have to do to get out of these situations. I mean, you point out that, say you're in the middle of one of these things, you somehow, first of all, the old rule, don't go there. If invited to a fight, how about just decline the invitation? But should you find yourself in the middle of one of these things somewhere, and the thing is, they can pop up, you're sitting there at a sidewalk cafe having dinner with your family, and all of a sudden here they are, and they're screaming at you and demanding that you raise a fist and do all this stuff. Even though it grates on you, it may well be that the smart move is just to find a way out, maybe even acquiesce to their stupid demands, because you point out, and it's certainly true, they all have video cameras running, and that actually is the goal, is for them to get video of you acting in such a way that's actionable.
It is theater. And you are now in the theater. The people that we're talking about in terms of politically sanctioned violence, they get training. They have their own trainers. And it's one of the dumbest things for us on our side is to assume they don't have training or to assume that their trainers are not very good, because they are. So what you now have is a group of people who understand exactly how far they can go, exactly how far they can push you. An example, my friend Ed Monk, a retired lieutenant colonel, he teaches at Last Resort Firearms Training. He's a brilliant trainer. Mm-hmm. He said, what if at this outdoor cafe somebody spits in your child's face? What's your response?
Normally you just punch it.
You would. I mean, doesn't the hackle stand up in the back of your head when you hear that? Mm-hmm. You just think that. However, that's not good enough. If you escalate from that point, you're it. They're going to push you even farther. You're going to escalate up. That escalation ladder is going to go up because you're dealing with people who are professional provocateurs. And they also, now think about this, you can commit an act of violence knowing that nothing is going to happen to you, nothing. You can set the Portland Ice facility on fire when there's people in it.
Which they did this past week. Set fire to a building, which is a felony actionable by lethal force on the spot.
And what was the result? The result was like, a couple of people arrested. They were let out with no cash bail.
Right.
Imagine you and I being involved in what is clearly a homicidal act. You think we get out with no cash bail? No, we're hell. I mean, look at the people in the June 6th or January 6th, quote-unquote, riot, insurrection, fill in the blank. There are people still in jail that haven't been charged because they can't find anything to charge them with. It's an un-American thing, as you can see.
Still holding them with no charges. Normally, you say that's just, no, people don't do that in America.
No, but unfortunately, and honestly, Tom, it makes me sick. But I mean, when I was writing this stuff, saying, okay, there are things you're going to have to walk away from. That when you took the training at Gunsight, or you took the training, fill in the blank with Greg Ellifritz or with Ed Monk or with Tom Givens, you learned that these actions taken against you, you could respond. However, you can't anymore. You may have to extricate yourself. And I don't like it.
Yeah, we hate it. It goes against the grain, but, at this point, it's called self-preservation. And because it's not, in this case, that they're going to take your life, it's that they're going to take everything else you have.
Absolutely true. I mean, and I think that a lot of times we forget that your job, the income with which you support your family, your home that you paid on for 20, 30 years, all of those things are on the line here because they can be attacked easily. And the people you're facing, essentially, because they are politically sanctioned, because they are backed by literally the ruling junta in the United States, if you want to put it that way, they know nothing happens to them, but they know that for you, for me and you, the process is the punishment. we lose everything.
The process is the punishment because they have district attorneys who love the idea of destroying your life. I mean, and that is, they have the ability to certainly to do that. I mean, literally destroying your life, losing your job, losing your home, losing your income, taking your money, maybe putting you in jail for months and months at a time without even charging you with a crime. You think, well, that's not possible. That's not even possible in the United States. Oh, yeah, it is. It's happening right now.
It's happening right now. And briefly, some years back, I got caught up in the gears of some federal stuff. I was innocent, but I cannot convey to you the terror that they can bring against you, because they can say to you, we can take everything, and they said to me, I said, I don't plead.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go to the mattresses. And they said, you'll go to the mattresses and you'll come out broke. And they're absolutely correct. And in this situation, it's even worse, because now you've got a whole series, these DAs that have been put in with money from Bloomberg, money from Soros. Their whole place there is, Soros, their whole place there is to let people go. That's what they're there for.
I don't want people to think this is a conspiracy. I would like for people to go start looking and do a little bit of research. You will find that there are a bunch of district attorneys around the country. Their campaigns were directly funded, and it's out there, it's open source stuff, directly funded by George Soros. I mean, this is not like conspiracy stuff. This is real.
This is real, and you have to see it as a system in place. It's a support system. Everything is tied to everything else. The other thing, one of the things I brought up, and this is again something I honest to God hate to say here, but the police aren't coming.
Yeah.
They are. It's a hard thing for me to say with so many friends of mine who are law enforcement, so much time that I've spent with them. In the larger urban areas especially, the police are neutered. And I have heard this from my friends in law enforcement, where they said, look, we no longer have qualified immunity. We know our department isn't going to stand behind us. We know that our lives, our families' lives, everything is on the line for us. And so as a consequence, what we're going to do is stand aside. They're
not going to run into the middle of that for you. No.
No, they're not. And you know what? I wouldn't blame them.
I just want to say, and I don't blame them a bit. Now, your article is it's got 10 points of this is what's going on, and therefore these are things you need to be aware of, and these are things you need to do. These are ideas you've had for a lifetime you need to put aside because there's a new reality here. Again, it's available at michaelbane.com. Circle all the way back, if you would, please. You talked about them having training. You're not talking about just informal. They actually have formal training for anarchists.
Yes, they do. These things have been planned for a long time, and the training itself is my understanding from talking to people is that it's actually pretty good. And that partly, as you know, in my youth, as a younger journalist, my specialty was riots. Right. I spent a lot of time in big urban riots. And partly from being in big urban riots, I met people who were involved in, shall we say, the planning of those riots, the way they worked. And it was an eye-opener for me because you tend to think in terms of spontaneity and this happens. There's none of that. If you go back and look at some of these summer riots in Portland and Seattle, I want you to watch, if you think of it in terms of a military action, if you watch how those riots develop, you'll see people standing to the side, and they've got buttons in their ear, and they're talking.
Yep.
That's not the police. That's the rioters. Those are the directors of the riot. That's
theater.
Overwatch.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Michael, I'm going to have to scoot here. I need to, let's tell people again where they can not only read this, but keep up with what you're doing these days.
It's michaelbane.tv. There's video. There's 17 years into the podcast. And there's these articles because these articles, I believe, very strongly need to be written.
All right, and that's Bane. It's B-A-N-E, Michael Bane, creator of Shooting Gallery, and on, all the TV shows that you know on Outdoor Channel, Sportsman Channel, all the rest of them. Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, man.